Subcommittee will come to order. Good morning. Welcome, everyone, to the Subcommittee's hearing on Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General's efforts related to the Food and Drug Administration. This is the first time since 2009 that the Subcommittee has had a hearing with the HHSIG. So thank you to our witness, Ms. Murrin, for appearing before us. Eliminating fraud, waste, and abuse and correcting mismanagement is one of the most important roles of our committee, and I'm deeply interested in the work that you do. Your office is at the forefront of these efforts as they relate to FDA. The subcommittee shares your interest in ensuring that the programs of FDA are operating at the highest levels of efficiency, responding to your recommendations, and protecting the public health, safety, and welfare of the American people. This morning, I'm interested in understanding what your office views as the biggest obstacles that are facing FDA today and down the road. As the largest Inspector General office in the federal government, the majority of your work addresses other parts of the Department of Health and Human Services. Since 2015, this subcommittee has provided your office with additional appropriations to specifically address FDA oversight. I'd like to use today's hearings to better understand how these funds have helped you to achieve your mission and what else we can do. So today I'd like to hear more about the work you've done to date, your plans to conduct adequate oversight of FDA programs, and the challenges that you face in ensuring that agreed upon recommendations are implemented and complaints are appropriately addressed. I look forward to discussing that with you as well as other important issues, and I want to say again that we appreciate you and all of the work that the Inspector General staff does and for all that you do. So let me, at this time, ask our distinguished ranking member, Mr. Fortenberry, if he has any opening remarks, and if so, I'd certainly like to recognize him at this time.
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for the recognition, and let me thank you as well publicly for your leadership in identifying this important gap, if you will, in our own oversight challenges and responsibilities. So this is an important hearing, and really appreciate your willingness to call it. Ms. Murrin, welcome to the Agricultural Appropriations Subcommittee. Your agency has a daunting task. We all realize that in overseeing the spending and performance of agencies so large that they can be bigger than some countries around the globe. So, and it's $1 trillion worth of spending that you have responsibility over. And as the chairman identified, part of that responsibility is over the Food and Drug Administration. So let's start with one of our most basic needs, drug safety. The people back home expect safe and effective drugs, vaccines, and medical devices. And as you note in your written statement, roughly 40% of finished drugs, and 80% of active drug ingredients are made in more than 150 countries. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to just read the sentence one more time. Roughly 40% of finished drugs and 80% of active drug ingredients are made in more than 150 countries. You think we can trace all that? Most Americans would be shocked to know that most drugs or drug ingredients are not produced here, and as your audits have noted, FDA conducts limited overseas inspections. So a GAO report, Government Accountability Office report from a few months ago, highlighted the deficiencies in this foreign drug inspection process and said, for instance, quote, the officials estimated that the agency generally gives 12 weeks of notice to establishments that investigators are coming when investigators are traveling from the United States. So, Chinese companies have 12 weeks notice to clean up their act. And we give domestic manufacturers no time at all? This makes sense? We need to know why the drug industry has moved drug production out of the United States. That's a fundamental question. And second, why we can't make pharmaceuticals in our own country. This is all the more urgent given the outbreak of the coronavirus. This has accentuated the urgent need for this nation to produce critical drugs and medical supplies right here. I also want to talk about another basic FDA function, that's food safety. While the committee in general can have opposing views on certain things, one thing we agree on is the government's role in ensuring that our food is safe. So we rely upon your agency and the GAO to evaluate and critique and make recommendations on how to fix what the FDA might not be doing correctly to reduce or eliminate food-related illness. So I see that your agency has only conducted 2 food-related audits since 2015. You can come back to that when we question. That's the information I see. And I'm hoping your agency will do more in the future to answer fundamental questions about our food supply. So your office spends roughly 4% of its budget on FDA-related work through the $1.5 million appropriated by this subcommittee. Yet the FDA is responsible for oversight of 20% of all consumer spending in the United States. You see the gap? So here's something we can celebrate. I am in full agreement with you that you need more resources for this important work. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop and yield back my time. And again, I appreciate your willingness to engage in this form of oversight.
Thank you, Mr. Fortenberry. Before Ms. Murren begins, a reminder to members that, as is customary with the subcommittee, members will be recognized by seniority for those that were here when I gavel the hearing to order, and then the order of arrival following that. I'll alternate majority-minority members, and we will adhere to the 5-minute rule. Ms. Murren, without objection, your entire written testimony will be included in the record. I recognize you now for your statement, and then we'll proceed with questions. You may summarize, or you may give the entire statement. It is completely up to you. The floor is yours, Ms. Murren.
Thank you, Chairman Bishop, Ranking Member Fortenberry, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me here today to discuss OIG's oversight of the Food and Drug Administration. We are grateful for the support this subcommittee has provided to OIG, which has allowed us to enhance our oversight of FDA's vital programs. Our oversight has prioritized safety. We have recommended numerous actions FDA can take to make the food, drugs, and devices that Americans rely on safer. While our oversight has resulted in important progress in each of these areas, much more remains to be done. We are grateful to the subcommittee for this opportunity to bring public attention to these safety issues. In food safety, our most pressing recommendations focus on food facility inspections and food recalls. It is imperative that FDA take appropriate action against all facilities with significant inspection violations and re-inspect these facilities in a timely manner to ensure the violations have been corrected. OIG found that FDA took no regulatory action in response to 22% of the significant inspection violations we reviewed, and that when FDA did take action, it most commonly relied on the facilities to make voluntary corrections. Finally, in almost half of all cases, FDA did not conduct a timely follow-up inspection to confirm the problem was corrected. Significant inspection violations can include finding rodents, salmonella, or listeria in food production areas. These are serious threats to the food supply that need to be addressed. With respect to food recalls, FDA took swift action to address many of the concerns we raised to ensure prompt and effective recalls. However, FDA has yet to establish performance metrics like capturing the time between identification of a potential hazard and the initiation of a recall. Without this, FDA cannot effectively identify and respond to firms that fail to initiate a timely voluntary recall, nor initiate a mandatory recall. This is especially important given that in our selected sample of 30 food recalls, the median time between when FDA became aware of a potential problem and when a firm issued a voluntary recall was 29 days. The average was 57 days. OIG has also identified vulnerabilities with FDA's oversight of the manufacture and distribution of prescription drugs. In response to our work, FDA resolved all 289 outstanding pre-approval inspections of generic drug manufacturers, most of which were for foreign manufacturers. Our ongoing work on the safety of foreign drug manufacturing assesses FDA's foreign drug manufacturer inspection process. Tracing drugs from the manufacturer through the supply chain to the consumer is also an area of concern for the OIG, because each time a drug changes hands, it creates opportunities for counterfeiting, tampering, or diversion. OIG found that drug tracing information can be used to trace the legal ownership, but not the physical movement of drugs through the supply chain. However, both types of information are needed to support FDA in identifying and resolving drug safety and security issues. In terms of devices, the OIG has ongoing concerns about FDA's oversight of network devices, such as hospital room infusion pumps and pacemakers. Without appropriate security controls, these devices can be susceptible to cybersecurity threats, such as ransomware and unauthorized remote access. In response to OIG's work, FDA made immediate changes to its pre- and post-market processes. However, OIG recommends further improvements, including that FDA establish procedures for securely sharing information about cybersecurity threats with key stakeholders. OIG will continue to provide FDA oversight in the areas of food, drug, and medical device safety. In addition, ongoing reviews expand our oversight to include curtailing youth tobacco use, combating the opioid crisis, and fostering drug competition. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today and share OIG's findings and recommendations on FDA. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Murrin. As you alluded, and as Mr. Fortenberry alluded, according to the latest data from GAO and FDA, more than 60% of drug manufacturers for the U.S. market are located overseas, and 80% of active pharmaceutical ingredients are manufactured overseas in more than 150 countries. The degree to which we rely on drug products that are made overseas raises significant challenges for FDA, and it's, of course, the subject of your audit, as you referenced. Can you walk us through some of the problems that you found in the foreign drug inspections process, and do you believe that the FDA currently has the capacity to effectively ensure the safety of imported drugs and active pharmaceutical ingredients? And what else do you think needs to be done in the event that you believe that we need to do more, which seems obvious with the limited resources that you have?
Thank you very much for your question. The OIG is currently conducting a study of foreign facility inspections for drug manufacturers. When I have the results of that, I will have updated information, and we will reach out to you and provide you with a detailed briefing.
Okay. Since 2015, the subcommittee has provided you with $1.5 million with the direction that it be transferred to specifically focus on oversight issues related to FDA. And it's clear that HHS OIG covers a large portfolio with limited resources, and the hope was that the FDA oversight issues could receive additional consideration with those funds. How have these funds allowed your office to focus more on FDA, and what activities have you been able to support that otherwise might not have been done? And can you quantify what additional resources would allow you to do? For example, what would an increase of $500,000 permit you to do that you can't do now?
Thank you.
Or $1 million.
Or $1 million, or two. I should start by saying the OIG is extremely grateful for the funding that this committee has provided and for the focus that the subcommittee has provided. You've both given us the funds these last 5 years and asked that we prepare a strategic plan. That process, our sharing that with you, has really helped us to focus our resources. The $1.5 million that you've been able to give us each year has taken us up to $3.7 million each year that we have been able to devote to FDA, also, which amounts to 16 staff years. So it has had a tremendous impact on the amount of resources that we have available. There are two main projects that I'd like to mention that may very well have not happened without this. One is about food. We did an audit of the food recall system that found such problems that when we had to issue an alert rather than wait for the audit to come out. And FDA fixed a number of the problems before it came out. We discovered that most of the recalls are voluntary, and if FDA and the manufacturer agree, there isn't a problem, right? But if the FDA and the manufacturer do not readily agree that a recall ought to happen, it can take a very long time to resolve. FDA has made some improvements in that area. We'd like to see them take more advantage of some of the FSMA requirements. We would not have known that there were these problems. And FDA has stepped out to really work on this. They've set up an FDA-wide senior team to work on it. They've taken many actions. We do have some outstanding recommendations. In addition to that, we wanted to look at food also from the inspection side. And I talked a little bit about that in my opening statement to say that we did a report in 2010 that found exactly the same thing, that found that most of the time, that at a significant portion of the time when a significant violation is found, FDA does not take action, okay? And that they, in half the cases, don't go back to independently verify that the problem has been fixed. Okay, we made recommendations that if there was a significant violation, an action had to be taken, and if there was a significant violation, there had to be a follow-up, both in 2010 and again in 2017. The money that you provided enabled us to go back to prove that these problems still existed on the ground and to emphasize that. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity to discuss this.
Thank you. Mr. Fortenberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just continue with the same line of questioning. Okay. Why are there surprise inspections of drug manufacturing here, whereas in some foreign countries, they're given 12 weeks notice? Is that fair?
As an oversight entity, we're looking at how the agency can function better. I really can't comment on that policy based on our work.
Why not? Where did the policy come from?
It would have come from FDA. I am not familiar with how it was developed.
I'd like you to look into that, please. I'd like you to develop an understanding as to why this unfair duality exists regarding domestic drug manufacturers versus drugs that are manufactured in certain foreign countries. I want to know why that exists, how it was developed, what rationale there is for that, what justification potentially, and if it needs to change, come back to us and tell us it needs to change.
We will do that.
I mean, apparently, it's grossly unfair.
Yes.
An unlevel playing field tilted toward multinational corporations who have moved their manufacturing overseas, probably to take advantage of lax labor standards and environmental standards for profiteering purposes. Now, I want to know if that's embedded somewhere because of the fault of Congress or the fault of the implementing agencies.
We will look into that and respond to you with that information.
This is very important, particularly given the raging coronavirus around the world and all of us suddenly discovering how much of our supply lines are related to the area that is the source of the infection.
Yes, and this is one of the reasons why we're very glad to be out in the field on our foreign drug inspection report.
So are our drugs safe?
As an OIG, we're always going to be able to find ways that things can be better. And we have identified certain weaknesses, and we'd love to see them, and we would working with FDA to see those fixed.
Extrapolating from that, what % of our drugs are not safe? See, we can't just keep talking in the abstract that we're looking for ways to fix this and we've identified a problem. It's not fully your problem, I understand.
Right.
But what recourse do I have? This, frankly, is one of the most important hearings going on in the United States Congress right now. It really is. And it falls to this agency, yours, and other people of goodwill throughout the executive branch to come together right now and get in front of this question so that there's a permanent restructuring so that we're not left vulnerable again like we are right now. I need your help in this regard.
We will be very happy to work with you on that.
But give me some more specifics. I'm sorry, it's an awkward question, but I've got to keep forcing you out of the abstract to the specific. Tell us how large this problem is. Quantify it in some way, not just we've identified these gaps. And I get it, you need to speak in that language. You need to be careful, but you have to understand, I have to push as well.
No, and I do appreciate that. Sir, I'd be worried that I would say a number that
I understand. That's a fair answer, but you know the challenge.
I do know the challenge, and we share the concerns and really appreciate the concerns that you were raising, and we'll be working as hard as we can to address these issues and provide you with information.
Okay, and this is the moment.
Yes.
Given the world's consciousness and our government's attentiveness to this gap right now is starting to be reported. It creates a moment of opportunity rather than a moment of blame. So let's seize the opportunity to actually dig deeper and find out why there's an unlevel playing field potentially between the incentives to drug manufacturers to stay in this country versus go overseas and the vulnerabilities that that creates for us. I need the specific answers to that. I need you to help me.
We will be happy to work on that and get back to you,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, is this fair?
It is fair.
Secondly, it's the same question. Is our food safe?
And I would give you the same answer.
I know you have to, but this is the broad architectural question.
Right.
And then if we move, yes, but here are a few gaps, great. Or no, we've got to get to work, fine. Clearly, we're somewhere in between.
I would put us more in the yes, but
Okay,
certainly than in the no.
all right. That's fair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fortenberry. Dr. Harris.
Thank you. And thank you very much for doing work that I think is important, because the FDA is very important, but you know, making sure that the FDA is fulfilling what I think most Americans expect from the FDA is important as well. So let me just walk through some of the things you mentioned in your written testimony here. First of all, one of your identified risks associated with medical device safety and security is the FDA needs to further mitigate risk of cybersecurity threats. Now, I just don't think of the FDA as kind of a cybersecurity agency. In what you found, do you think they have the experienced personnel that could do this? Because these devices are complicated. They're all over the place. There are a lot of them. I imagine there are a lot of ways cybersecurity could be compromised. Do they have the expertise in the agency to do this?
Actually, sir, we would say that this is an area where FDA is very much ahead of the curve. FDA is seen as a leader in the area of cybersecurity and in the security of medical devices. And while thankfully there's never been an instance of those being compromised, FDA is devoting resources to making sure that they're out ahead of it to prevent it before it happens.
Good. So you think they'll be able to deal with that with the resources they have? I
would certainly suggest that you ask them that question, sir.
Okay.
But we definitely, in our reviews, have found them working in the right direction.
Okay. With regards to, and then you also, part of your testimony, you expand your oversight to include curtailing youth tobacco use, combating the opioid crisis, fostering drug competition. Now, you do say youth tobacco use, and you know the current concern is with vaping, not tobacco products, but you can vape other products. And are you looking at whether the FDA actually has the ability, or any government agency has the ability, but you're particularly concerned with the FDA, to actually regulate vaping of non-tobacco products? You see what I mean? I mean, they clearly they have jurisdiction over tobacco products or nicotine.
Right.
But if you're vaping marijuana and there's no tobacco in it, no nicotine in it, it's unclear to me that do they have the ability under the current law to regulate a device that delivers something that's either a non-pharmaceutical or something that is the device itself that's delivering an illegal drug, which would be marijuana?
Not being a lawyer, sir, I would hesitate to answer. I certainly understand your concern. I'd be happy to have our counsel's office prepare an answer. I believe that the answer is no. Right now, the authority is in tobacco in the forms that it's delivered.
Yeah, that's what I imagine, but if you could get back to me on that, I appreciate that. In terms of combating the opioid crisis, one thing that the FDA could do, I think, is to somehow make naloxone more available than it is. It's available, but you know, there are controversies. You know, co-prescribing, is the FDA doing all it can do to promote co-prescribing? So is that one of the things you looked at in the FDA's role in making sure naloxone gets delivered to where it could be used to save lives?
We have not looked at that aspect with FDA. The OIG has identified in our whole HHS portfolio 4 overarching priority areas. One of those is the opioid crisis, and we have a body of work on the availability of naloxone. We have a body of work on the availability of drug-assisted treatment across the United States. And so we have been very active in that area.
Okay. I mean, and again, specifically,
But in terms of
you do
FDA,
look at that, in terms of what the FDA's role in naloxone is. Now, one last topic is because you look at the safety of things that are being made available to Americans, and I'm going to ask you about CBD, okay? Because CBD is PDLX is an FDA-approved drug. I think that gives the FDA the ability to regulate CBD in the marketplace. It's clearly not being regulated enthusiastically or broadly, and we get more and more reports of people who make health claims, and sometimes they're not specific. You know, I'm going to treat this guy, but you're going to feel better if you take it or something like that. But the product doesn't even have a lot of CBD in there, maybe none at all. So it's it's a purity issue. Do you find that this is an area where the FDA has not used its regulatory authority as it perhaps should? And is there politics involved in this or what? Because there are a lot of people who are taking this thinking that it's going to make them feel better or it has some medical qualities, but these products are sometimes not pure.
I have to acknowledge, sir, that our oversight of FDA has not extended to that topic, and that we could add that to our list of potential topics, but I do not have information that I can share with you now.
Thank you very much. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Adderholt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's encouraging to learn that back in your your August 2019 report on HHS's response to the Ebola outbreak, that despite other failures, that FDA and HHS did collaborate effectively to begin the trial and production of vaccine and drug treatments. I know that the current priority regarding COVID-19 is containment and vaccines. However, I want to ask you about the important, or actually how important, is the rapid production of antibodies, and especially for people that are suffering from the virus.
Sir, I would suggest that you would get a much better informed answer for that from FDA than I would be able to provide you today.
Okay. As far as you couldn't really speak to FDA as for necessarily about their if they have. Do you know if they've looked into the possibility of a private sector providers might be able to provide infusion-ready antibody drugs?
I do not know the answer to that at this point, sir, no. OIG is currently developing its oversight plan for looking at the coronavirus. There were meetings on it yesterday and again today. And I will be sure to make sure that that suggestion goes into those discussions.
Okay. Oh, well, a lot of times in this subcommittee, the issue of cybersecurity is raised. If the protection of sensitive data is important, then the safeguarding of medical devices, including the ones that are implanted, are absolutely vital. Has FDA become more proactive in this field, following your recommendations, particularly in the post-market setting?
Yes, FDA has made progress in this area. We can continue to believe that more progress could be made. They're moving from a passive reporting system to an active an active look for data, and I think that they will find that that is much more useful to them. So yes, I do believe that they are making progress.
Do you believe there's any particular areas where a rush to greater connectivity should be slowed down or cautioned in any way?
I think everything that FDA does should be done with caution, sir. I don't think that, as I said, fortunately, we have never had a real-world experience of this, and I think it's very important that we continue to take this as a top area of concern. But I think that we should continue to move at the cautious pace we have been.
Is there any particular sectors of the healthcare industry that are acting irresponsibly with cybersecurity from your viewpoint?
In terms of medical devices, sir? No, I didn't.
Or anything, yeah.
No.
Okay. I want to ask you about the actions you've taken to improve and protect food supply and reduce preventable foodborne illnesses. You stated that the FDA has agreed with several of your recommendations to address food supply vulnerabilities. How quickly is FDA acting on these recommendations?
It varies widely, sir. As on a number of issues, for instance, when we issued the early alert on the audit report that came out on food recalls, most of those recommendations were implemented even before the full audit report was issued. Okay, and then again, however, you can see on inspections where while there have been some of our recommendations that we have made to them have been implemented, there are recommendations that we've had about how to improve food inspections, how to deal consistently with significant violations that have not been dealt with in 10 years. And we very much appreciated this opportunity to bring that to the subcommittee. I believe that we have provided the subcommittee with this list of all of our open recommendations with FDA, okay, so that and we'd be happy to provide any additional information on any of those.
Okay. What steps do you plan to be taking in the upcoming year to better guard against food production lines, or better guard food production lines themselves? Is there any particular steps that you could mention that come to mind, or whatever? Or any kind of additional structural changes that you believe need to take place?
Well, as we've been talking about the follow-up on significant violations, I think that is exceedingly important. There also continue to be issues about food safety that I'm sorry. I would have, may I respond to that later, sir?
Yeah, if you
give you a
back
full
with
list.
us on
Yes.
that would be, yeah, but if you could, would be helpful to get back with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cuellar.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry I'm late. I have two other committee hearings at the same time. I want to say that, I want to talk about the coronavirus. And on February 20th, I joined some of my House colleagues a letter to the President asking him that if there's any vaccine or treatment developed by U.S. taxpayers, that taxpayers' dollars, that it be accessible, affordable, and available Just want to see how we can work with the FDA in your position, suggestions to make sure that as we come up with that the rural communities be guaranteed access. As you know, we sometimes have a tendency of going to the big urban areas, but as somebody that represents a lot of rural areas, just like a lot of our members, how do we make sure that it's not only the large health departments in large cities and urban area cities get that, but also the rural areas? Any suggestions or thoughts on this?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, something that the Office of Inspector General can contribute to this conversation is that we have in other areas looked at the availability. For instance, I believe I mentioned medication-assisted treatment, where that's available in the United States versus where the need is. And we could identify the availability in rural areas versus city areas. And that is but one type of area where we have looked at the distribution of available resources as compared to where the problem is.
Did y'all come up with any recommendations in that area that you looked at?
Yes, we did, sir. And unfortunately, I did not prepare to discuss that report today. But I would be happy to get back to you about that.
If you don't mind.
Yes.
And then to finish your thought, sorry.
No, but that OIG could take a look at distribution on issues like a vaccine, just to see where it was going and where it was available and how that compared to urban and rural settings.
And I certainly feel that your office certainly can look at that distribution. I'm just concerned sometimes we have a tendency of forgetting the rural areas. Yes. We got to make sure we don't. But anyway, thank you for the job that y'all do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cuellar. Ms. Murrin, your office issued a report last August that raised concerns about FDA's resolution of long-standing OIG recommendations, and your report said that FDA has since tackled the backlog and now have fewer outstanding issues. Could you tell us whether or not you feel that FDA is now on a good path to address future recommendations on a timely basis? Is there anything you think the subcommittee could do to ensure FDA's continued follow-up to your recommendations more promptly?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. I would certainly say that FDA is on a better path. What that report found was that in 2015 and 2016, FDA had actually not provided any information in terms of its actions on any of our audit recommendations. Since that time, there has been improvement. In the last 5 years, OIG has issued 70 recommendations from either our audits or our evaluations. 31 of those recommendations have been implemented. 39 of them remain unimplemented or not completely implemented. Then there's another 11 that we had recommended before that still remain unimplemented. So that's a total of 50 unimplemented recommendations. I do believe that hearings like this, where we're able to talk about what we particularly see as the most important issues and the most important outstanding recommendations, can raise the priority for an agency and inspire progress.
Thank you. We would certainly welcome any suggestions on your part for what we can do. You released an audit of the FDA food safety recalls.
Yes.
In September of 2017, which was another depressing report to read. You found that the FDA could not always ensure that firms initiated the recalls promptly, and some customers became ill, and others were at risk of illness, and some cases of death. You found that the FDA relies primarily on voluntary recalls, which makes the timeliness largely dependent on the firm's willingness to take action. And you found that the recalls were not always initiated promptly because FDA does not have adequate procedures to ensure that firms take prompt and effective action in initiating voluntary food recalls. And you found that FDA didn't always evaluate the health hazards in a timely manner. what is the FDA doing to better respond to your recommendations about strengthening their recall program, and what challenges remain?
Thank you very much for that question. This is an area where we have seen great progress on the part of FDA. FDA has implemented our recommendations as regards improving their procedures. They've set process timelines for when they will have made decisions about a recall. They have improved their regulations in that area. What they have not done, sir, that we would really very much like to see them do, is they haven't put into their database information that would allow them to track the time from when they first learn about a problem to when the recall actually happens. And that's the most critical piece of information. And we think that they have to be able both to plan for success and to test their success.
Thank you very much. Your 2017 report on the domestic food safety inspections is also hard reading. You said that FDA wasted inspectors' time going to facilities that were out of business and not operating, that they found serious violations. When they found serious violations, that they didn't always take action immediately to remedy the problem, that they failed to conduct timely follow-up inspections. In half of the cases, they took no action within a year. In 17% of cases, and it never did a follow-up inspection. So what is your view of what FDA promised to do to address your findings, and do you plan to go back and check what they did? And can you walk us through audits that you expect to release this fiscal year?
Yes. On this topic, we just did the follow-up because we had done a 2010 report on inspections that had found these problems and that had made a series of recommendations. We went back out in 2017 and came back even more strongly advocating for our recommendations that we've been talking about here today, that if there is a significant violation found, there needs to be a follow-up action. There needs to be regulatory action on the part of FDA, official action, and then there needs to be a follow-up review. Also, we have been recommending that a civil monetary penalty, that's actually our oldest outstanding recommendation, that if FDA had the ability to do that, that might help motivate facilities to fix problems quickly.
You're the OIG. Do you feel that they have the authority, or do we need to give them authority from Congress? Do they have existing authority to assure into their oversight in terms of health, safety, and welfare?
So they have the existing authority certainly to follow through on every single violation and to do the follow-up review to make sure that action has happened. The civil monetary penalty they do not have, and that would take a legislative change.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fortenberry?
Okay, Ms. Murren, you said that this hearing is very important to you.
Yes.
In terms of setting priorities. So I'm going to go back to the first question, and I asked you two questions. One is, given the huge amount of dependence we have on overseas supplies of drugs and drug ingredients, the mechanism by which we ensure that those drugs are safe is deficient. That's what I hear you saying.
I said that we are currently studying.
Okay, that's the first question. How is that to be improved? The second question is, why the imbalance? What are the incentives in our system that have compelled these corporations to move those product productions overseas? And you said we're going to get back to you on that, so how is that going to happen? I met your fine staff here, and there's a lot of notes being taken, so give me how you're going to do that and what timeline.
We will respond to you within 2 weeks with our plan of action.
Okay, great. And I don't want to put the chairman on the spot, but I think we're in alignment in this regard. Is that fair, Mr. Chairman?
It is.
That we can say that this is a priority of the committee?
Yes.
Thank you. So that's important to me. I want to turn, though, to, it's important to all, not me, it's important. And we've got a moment here, if I can't emphasize it enough. There is clarity around just how big a problem this is because of the coronavirus outbreak. We've known it's a problem for a long time, yet we're passive in light of it until there's some emergency. We're in the emergency room. 911, help us answer this question now.
Yes, sir, we very much like to take advantage of opportunities to solve problems.
Thank you. Let me ask you another question, diverting topics for a moment. I want to talk about the disease called ALS, sometimes known as Lou Gehrig's disease. It's that plus many other degenerative diseases, there is no cure. However, in the case of ALS, there is a treatment showing some promise on the horizon. Last year, I introduced a bill called ALS Placebo No More. We all agreed, or many of us agreed, on a bill called Right to Try a little while back. We thought we'd solved the problem for the sickest Americans who are willing to go into experimental treatment, assuming that full liability themselves. But it doesn't solve a problem for everyone. So since your agency does extensive audit work over the National Institutes of Health and the Food and Drug Administration, would you be willing to work on an assessment how these two agencies can improve their work on clinical trials?
If funding is available within the priorities that are set, we would be delighted to do that.
Okay, so you have resource constraints. So you're obvious, this isn't a question you've looked at before, I assume.
That is correct.
Okay. Well, here's the deeper related question. If you could provide a review across FDA centers to determine whether drug treatments within clinical trials are continued for patients showing benefits, that would be most helpful. That would also be consistent with the spirit of the Right to Try law that we passed earlier, which has some inhibiting factors built into it, sadly. It gave a lot of us a head fake, unfortunately, and gave false hope to many people. In a degenerative disease like ALS, where there is a treatment on the horizon and a clinical trial basically excluded certain people for non-good scientific reason. There's a problem here. We've raised this with the FDA. There's some admission that, yeah, we need to change the procedures here. If there could be work across NIH and FDA to ensure that these two agencies can work together to improve the clinical trial process, it would bring hope in a manner that's consistent. We can't promise anything, but it would bring hope to our structural approach to how we move drugs onto the market quicker or give people exceptional opportunities when they basically have no other option. A little bit beyond your purview, I get this, and you did a fine job of segueing to help me by giving me more funds. I heard what you said, okay? But again, this is important.
No.
Because there is suffering, there are certain structural opportunities for change, if you will, let's put it that way, that we think could alleviate the suffering and bring treatment options to people quicker.
Thank you, Mr. Fortenberry. Every year, the OIG shares with this subcommittee its strategic plan for FDA, and we actually also produce a strategic plan for NIH. Would be happy to share those, particularly, obviously, the FDA one.
I'm skimming the surface here. We can actually provide you some of the insights we've gained, some research in this regard to help you prioritize.
That's exactly what I was hoping to say, that we could use the process of producing that document to make sure we're...
This is really important for a lot of people suffering, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Adderholt.
I want to ask a little bit about oversight and dealing with tobacco use and opioid. Can you update us on the FDA's retail compliance inspections and the availability of tobacco products to youth and children?
I am going to be in an excellent position to be able to do that, sir, in some amount of time. That we have actually just begun a review of FDA's retail inspections that is going to look at where those are happening. It'll look at all the different retail establishments of any type that is providing any type of tobacco product. And we will be able to give you better information about the sort of areas where those are happening. If there's any areas where they're, they clustered around schools, are they not going around schools? We will have infinitely better information to provide you with that in a year.
And when, in a year?
Yes, I would think, we may have some
Initial information.
initial information earlier than that. But that is an area of profound concern to us, and that is our very next study that we've actually just started.
Oh, have you assessed or taken action on online sales?
That will be part of this consideration. These FDA inspections happen both for any type of retail situation, so that would include online stores.
Okay. I think it's important that we don't let mismanagement of opioids result in the unavailability to patients that really need pain control, especially on short-term basis after they've had some kind of medical procedure. What would be your opinion of a voluntary or mandatory rule by which prescribers can only prescribe, say, 6 opioid pills to a patient, and that any refill has to be signed off on by a prescriber doctor prescribing?
That's a level of medical knowledge would be needed to speak at that specifically, and I don't think that would be appropriate for me.
When you say 6, yeah, or well, what about some limited amount?
I believe that happens now.
Do you know how that works?
Not through our studies. I do not have that information here. But we have done a full range of work on opioids, and we would be very happy to arrange for a briefing on everything that we've done.
Have you identified any areas where FDA did not properly hold manufacturers accountable for mitigating the risk of opioid use and abuse?
We are about, I think, within the next month to 6 weeks, about to issue a report that will touch on that subject. It will look at how FDA has used, and I'm sorry, I don't remember what REMS stands for, one of its programs for monitoring drugs and how and their impact out in the real world, and how they've been using that or not using that in terms of the opioid crisis. But we expect that report to come out final in another month.
On a somewhat related issue, tomorrow the House is going to consider a piece of legislation that's going to prohibit remote retail sales of tobacco products. What is your opinion as to how reasonable it is to make it illegal for adults to purchase tobacco online when alcohol can be purchased that way?
I would say that that's a policy call that the OIG would not have a position on.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Adderholt. Ms. Murrin, I think we have about exhausted our questions for you today, and we want to thank you very much for being here. Along with what we've discussed, we will also forward you some additional questions for the record, and we'll appreciate your diligence in getting your responses to us by the deadline set by the committee. And of course, Mr. Fortenberry has indicated a request that you promised to get us within 2 weeks, and we look forward to receiving that. Thank you so very much for your testimony. We look forward to working with you as you continue the FY 2021 appropriations process. With that, the committee is adjourned.
Thank you.